Good morning. Man, so generally, I preach about every 3 to 4 months, so I don't get up here too often and see all of your wonderful faces very often. Luckily, this time around, it's about 3 to 4 weeks, so the time span there is a little bit shorter. Um, Man, I love to preach. I do. I absolutely love preaching. What I don't love about preaching is the stress and the anxiety that it brings on me. My buddy Luke, I'm going to embarrass him real quick. He was going to come up here with his mom to do announcements, but he couldn't do it because he didn't want to go up here in front of all you guys. And I said, hey, buddy, it's okay because I'm going to go puke here in a second, which, Luke, by the way, I did. So that's how bad my anxiety is, buddy. So don't worry about it, okay? It's okay. So bear with me as I work through this. You guys know I deal with that silly anxiety stuff, and you guys always tell me, don't worry about that. You do such a wonderful job. And, the thing is, I have this extremely high and probably selfish, sinful standard that I have for myself, and I'm a perfectionist, and it has to be exactly how I want it, and if it's not, I feel like I just bombed. It's like on my race car. I can tell you every single place on my race car when I build the new body, I can tell you every place I made a mistake on. Now, you may not be able to see it, but I know it's there. So let's get started. My dad had told me, he said, you know what, you just preached a few weeks ago, cut that greeting short. So, Dad, I'm listening to you. So today we are indeed still in our Coram Deo Series. That's in the book of John. If you want to start flipping there, we're going to be on page 520. That is 520 in those blue Bibles there in the pews with you, which that is a gift to you if you do not have a Bible. Right, Lily? That's a gift to you. You're looking at me like I'm speaking like some other language. I'm speaking English, correct? We hope. Well, you can understand it. So, So 520 on those pew Bibles is John chapter 6. The Coram Deo series, it means in the presence of God. And I don't know if I can't remember if he talked about it last week or the week before, but I know for a fact when I preached, I reminded you that the Coram Deo series is about being in the presence of God. And it's perfect for the book of John because we have so many different stories where people are literally with Jesus. And we know that they are in the presence of God because Jesus is God. Amen? There we go. So today we're going to be talking about the feeding of the 5,000. I'm calling this sermon the extraordinary feeding, or the extraordinary, I guess, however you want to say it. But we're going to be talking about the feeding here that started out as 5 loaves of bread and 2 very small fish. Now, I wanted to bring up like a table up here, one on this side, one on that side, and I was going to bring some bread up here, and I was going to have like those, what do you call them, like the Billy Bob fish things that sing. Or maybe even have some real fish up here, but then I was like, you know what, my wife hates fish, and if she gets a whiff of that, her pregnant self might do what I just did back there, you know what I'm saying? And then my other thought was, it's so close to lunchtime that some of you might be tempted to come up here and snack on this. So I didn't bring those up here, but I want you to remember 5 loaves, 5 small loaves, and 2 very small fish is where we're going to start out. This is the only miracle outside of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is the only miracle that appears in all 4 of the Gospels. So it's probably pretty important, right? It's probably something that we can look at, we can learn from, and we can grow from, right? So that's our goal today is I'm going to pull out 3 different truths that I want you to see in this passage, and I want you to apply it to your own life. Now, as I'm talking about those, if you're feeling a little guilty, God might be speaking to you. So open up those eyes, open up those ears, and open up your heart because we're about to learn some stuff. Let's go ahead and read that scripture. It's John chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 1. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Real quick, I'm going to stop us right here. The Sea of Tiberias, that that name, it's the Sea of Galilee, but they called it the Sea of Tiberias because at the time that John wrote this, that's what it was known as. It was written, or I'm not written, it was named after the city of Tiberia, I believe is what the name of it was, but it was named after an empire, or an emperor, a Roman emperor. So to call it that, the readers would be more familiar of where this is happening than just the Sea of Galilee. So verse 3, Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish." Remember, so that's 5 loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many? Verse 10, Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Verse 11 says that Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. We know from other Gospels that Jesus, the way he did this was he had his disciples take baskets of food around. Now these people, they were grouped in about 50 to 100 different people in the groups, as they were separated, sitting in the grass. And so the disciples, they'd carry a bunch of this food that was coming out of, where's this coming from? We don't know yet, right? We know. But let's keep reading here. So Jesus then took the loaves, and when we read that, verse 12, and when they had eaten their fill, that's the people that they were feeding, when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. Real quick, how many disciples are there? 12. So that's where that 12 baskets come from. Some people, there's a debate on that, but the stronger, my opinion is that it's 12 baskets. There's 12 guys carrying food around, okay? So verse 14, when the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world. They're talking about Jesus there in verse 15. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. I forgot to mention here for you where it says, I can't find it. There's a phrase in there, it says, after these things, I don't think it's in the ESV, but it says, after these things, meta tauta is the Greek on that. And that is translated to mean not necessarily that these events here in chapter 6 happened right after chapter 5, but they happened about 6 to 12 months afterwards. So understanding that is important because that's where these big crowds were coming from. So Jesus had about 6 to 12 more months there where he was ministering, where he was probably performing miracles, and where he was gaining this famous name, I guess is what you could call it, as this guy who was doing miracles, who was doing these things that people just did not understand. And so that's where this large crowd came from, is because Jesus had another 6 to 12 months after chapter 5 where these people started following him. To help strengthen up the Bible's historical accuracy, I want to give you a tidbit of information here. I told you about the Sea of Tiberias versus the Sea of Galilee. It was named after a city of Tiberias, which was in honor of Emperor Tiberius. It's also the area where a 6-day war happened in 1967. So that was just a few years ago, right? 1967. It was between the Syrian and the Israeli forces. So the Bible, we're talking history here. This stuff is literally happening in real places. And the last thing I want to mention to you, these people, towards the end of that passage, and I think it's verses 14 and 15, it talks about how they wanted to come, they wanted to make Jesus their king. And their idea there was that they would make Jesus their king, and he would come and he would overthrow the Roman Empire. That he would take charge. This is a time around Passover, and so these people, the majority of these people that were following Jesus, that were in that large crowd, they were on their way to the Passover, and the way that I understood it as I was reading these commentaries to prepare for today was it would be like for us as Americans for the 4th of July. And in the 4th of July, what three colors do you see the most? Red, white, and blue, because, hey, we're Americans. We're on fire for the USA, and we're just all hyped up. And, I mean, we all love the United States anyways, but for some reason on the 4th of July, it's when every single person is really, really, really hyped up for their country. And that's how these people were. They were ready for a new leader. That's all I'm going to say about that. They were ready for a new leader, and so they wanted to make Jesus that new leader. And they were hyped up to do that. Every time I preach, I give you guys 3 truths. Today, we're going to talk about 4 truths. No, I'm just kidding. We got 3. We're talking about 3 truths. Truth number 1, which, by the way, I know I say this every time I preach, but if you're taking notes, now's the time to start writing stuff down. And these truths are a little bit longer. So I believe on my slides, I should have 1 word underlined for each truth. So just write that word down. But truth number 1, we must be compassionate to other people. We must be compassionate to other people. What did Jesus do here? He showed these people compassion. The majority, if not all of the miracles that Jesus performs, what is he doing? He's showing people compassion. So what is compassion? Maybe you're somebody who's not familiar with that word. Compassion, I looked it up, so this is, it's on Google, so it's the right definition, right? Compassion is sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. Compassion is love. Compassion is patience. Compassion is kindness. And this is exactly how Jesus treated those people, with compassion. He knew that a lot of these people that were following him, all they wanted to do was see a miracle. They wanted Jesus to perform like some monkey doing tricks. They didn't care about their spiritual needs. All they cared about were their physical needs. They didn't need Jesus to save their souls. They needed Jesus to save them from colds. And I just came up with that, so if it's a little lame, I'm sorry. But Jesus showed these people compassion after a really long day of hearing him preach, of seeing him do whatever, of hanging out in the warmth of the weather. We know it was warm because that grass, the grass is there, it's green. They had grass, it wasn't dried up. We know it was in the spring, so the springtime is getting a little bit warmer. Yesterday, we went to Jurassic Quest over at Century 2. And as we're walking out, my wife said, man, it's a little hot. We're almost in springtime. It's a little warm, it's a little toasty. Now, today is a little bit different. But these people, they sat out there all day, and you better believe that they were hungry by the end of that day. And Jesus knew it. Jesus knew that these people needed compassion. They needed food. Because what does food do for us? It helps us go. It helps us keep moving forward. Some of us, it helps us grow. Every single one of us in this room, every single one of us needs compassion. Maybe it's not right this very second, but every single one of us at one point, probably more than one point in our lives, we need compassion. Oftentimes people will need compassion when we are drained. Have you noticed that? When we are the most tired, you have somebody come up and say, hey man, I need you to help me change my tire. Or hey, I need you to come by and unclog a toilet. Or hey, I just need somebody to sit with me. And a lot of the times it is when we are the most tired when people come to us. I'm sure Jesus was tired. In fact, I know he was tired. Here's your spoiler alert for the day. Doing ministry work is exhausting. Preaching, teaching, caring for other people, visiting with other people, it is exhausting. So Jesus was tired, but he put his own needs to rest to the side, and he addressed the needs of the many. Just because we are busy, just because we are tired, it does not mean that we cannot and we should not show compassion to others that are in need. Sometimes the people who need compassion the most, they'll push your limits. Oh man, they will push your buttons like it's no tomorrow. But guess what? They still need compassion. They still need you to show them God's love and God's mercy and God's kindness and God's patience. Because remember, as Christian people, as people who are following Jesus, He is our model. He is our goal. I told you a little bit ago that I'm a perfectionist. Well, guess what? I will never, ever be perfect. Ask my wife. I'm far from it. But Jesus is who we are to model our lives after. He is the one that we are to see and look forward to and to try to live our life exactly as He did. Even when people have the wrong intentions, when they come to us, when they say, hey, we need you to help me out here. They might have intentions that are not pure. I was at a church and we had a family who, they were down on their luck. They needed some help paying bills. I think it was about New Year's Eve. We'd helped them pay some bills. I don't remember what it was, or water, rent. I don't know what it was. But we helped them. We gave them money so they could go pay their bills, whatever it was. And then we learned a couple days later that they'd gone out gambling with money they had. They had gone out partying with money that they said they didn't have. It can be difficult to tell when people are in true need or when they're just trying to take advantage of you. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter. Because we are called to show people compassion. We are called to act like Jesus. And it should be our hope. It should be our desire that when we do show compassion to people, that they see Jesus in us. That they can see a difference within us. So it's important when you're showing people that compassion that you're not complaining like, oh man, I got to go help this guy again. Last weekend, Jackson, our 2.5-year-old son, decided to throw an itty little bitty dinosaur into the toilet and flush it. And it clogged it. And I called a really good friend of mine, or I texted him, Johnny Whitmore. I've known him for years and years and years. I said, Johnny, I need your help. And it seems like every year there's at least once or twice where I got to call Johnny to come to my house and help me for something, whether it's heating, whether it's the air conditioning, whether it's a plumbing issue. And Johnny, you know what he does? He comes and he helps me. Johnny on the spot. He is an amazing guy. I love Johnny, not just because he does stuff for me, but because he's a really good example of what it means to be a Christian. Sometimes I struggle with showing people compassion. I struggle with being patient with people. But I bet that if Jesus weren't perfect and if God weren't perfect, they are, but if they weren't, I can only imagine how they would feel about me. Because I need help all the time. It goes beyond unclogging a toilet. I need compassion every day. We don't know what people are going through. Life is hard. They could have just lost a job. They could have just gotten a divorce. They could have lost a family member. We don't know what they are dealing with. So we have to show them compassion. Because we live in a hurting world. We live in a world who needs Jesus. And if we have Jesus, why in the world would we not want to share Him with them? The compassion of Christ, it's like none other. It's perfect, it's pure, it's righteous. We see it all throughout Scripture. It's beautiful. The compassion that Jesus shows us. Truth number 2. We might be confused about God's plans. We might be confused. That's the word there, is the confusion. We see the confusion of the 12 disciples a little bit better in some of the other Gospels, but they're not really sure what to do here. They don't know what Jesus is wanting from them. We got a guy who's talking about 200 denarii. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. My dad and Pete will both tell me later, hey, you said that wrong. But we're talking about 8 months worth of a wage that they were talking about here. 8 months worth of money would not even feed all of those people. There's 5,000 men who are in attendance. Well, guess what? Each of those men, they had wives. Most of them had wives and kids. And so from the commentaries that I read, they're estimating that there was between 15 and 25,000 people at this little area next to the Sea of Galilee that Jesus needs to feed, that Jesus is showing compassion to. Now, to give you a little bit of context, I better not drift too far away from my notes because I want you to understand this really good. Intrust Bank Arena, the arena that we have here in Wichita, it holds between 15 and 16,000 people. That would be like the entire Intrust Bank Arena being filled of people that you have to feed. Now, what are you going to do? Hey, Jesus, I need you, bro. Come on. Come in clutch. Pray, yeah, exactly. The T-Mobile Center up in Kansas City, it holds nearly 19,000 people. So we're talking about small arenas full of people that are here with Jesus and his 12 disciples and who Jesus shows the compassion to. And they're hungry. They want to eat. And the disciples, they don't know what's going to happen, even though they've spent all this time with Jesus. They know who Jesus is, but they still were a little bit confused about his plan. Their minds were struggling to keep up. They were working in overdrive because they could not comprehend the Lord's plan. And guess what? That's okay, because we're only human. I tell the youth kids this, and sometimes they look a little funny. I mean, I'm sure I've said it here, but our little itty-bitty, teeny human brains are not anywhere near able to comprehend the size of God's brain and what he can understand, what he can see, and what he can do. And so for us to be confused, it's natural to not be sure because we don't know everything. We are not God. We struggle with that because we put limits on God. They struggled with it in this story because, hey, we only had 5 loaves and 2 small fish. So what are you going to do with this, Jesus? I mean, these guys, they had already seen Jesus turn water into wine. I mean, 5 loaves and 2 fish. Bro, you can't feed 25,000 people with that. Jesus said, challenge accepted. So many times God will teach us not only in times of clearness, in times of clarity, but a lot of times he will teach us and others in times of confusion. Because God is always in control. It does not matter the situation. It does not matter how dark life may seem. God is in control. It doesn't matter if you just lost your job. It doesn't matter if your spouse just kicked you out of the house. It doesn't matter if you just found out that your son that's unborn yet has no kidneys and the doctors are giving him a slight chance to live. God is still on the throne, and he's always in control. Always. No matter how confusing it might be to us, God has a perfect plan. He knows it all. There's never a fog for him. You know how sometimes you're trying to think through something and you just have like this, like a roadblock, like a brain freeze. You just can't see things clearly. For God, there's none of that because he has that perfect plan. And we have to have faith that he is in control, that he's in the driver's seat. You know, it takes a lot for me to drive with somebody, to sit in the passenger seat. Because I like being in the driver's seat. I like being in control. That's probably why I race cars. Because I like being the one who can make that machine do whatever I want it to do. I don't like being at the mercy of somebody else. So how do we fight that confusion that we might have about God's plan? Well, for one, spend more time in prayer. For two, spend more time in the Bible. The closer you are to God, the louder His voice will be in times of pain and suffering and in times of confusion. I used to use the example of when I was a kid and I played football, and you're out there on the field, you got the other players yelling, you got the crowd, shouting and roaring, and you hear this voice, Joel, shift over. Joel, you're in the wrong spot. You hear that coach's voice above everything else because you have that close relationship with that coach. And through all of that other noise, through all of the other distractions, you can hear him speak to you and direct you and eliminate any confusion that you might have. Jesus is the ultimate coach. I've got kids that a lot of times they'll say, Joel, I don't have time to read the Bible. I've had adults say it too, and it blows my mind because it's like, you know what? I know that you guys will sit there, I'm talking to the kids, you guys will sit there and play video games for hours upon hours upon hours. Kids and adults, I know you guys will sit there and you will binge watch something on Netflix, on Disney Plus. You'll sit there for hours watching the same show. Survivors, whatever you're watching. Karis has me watching that Grey's Anatomy show right now. But you'll sit there for hours watching that, but you don't have any time for Jesus? I just don't understand that. Because of all the compassion that he has showed us, and we can't spend 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes with him a day. We may not always understand his plan, but I promise you it's always perfect because he is perfect. We're only human, and when we go through things in life, we might be a little confused about what God has planned. Truth number 3. We most certainly will be amazed at what God will do. We will be amazed at what God will do. We just have to sit back and watch the Lord work. When's the last time you did that? You just sat back and you watched as Jesus, as God did wonderful works in your life. That's a straight fact. That is the most true truth I've ever shared with you guys, is that Jesus will do and has done amazing things for you and for me. During the bad times and during the good times. So let's talk about some amazing things that God has done. Let's start with the Old Testament, of course. First of all, you have him creating literally everything in existence. We've talked about that. The book of Genesis, it tells us it's a recount of the creation story. God uses the Word. He uses Jesus to speak things into existence. Not cool enough for you? What about that burning bush? That burning bush where Moses was walking through the desert. He was tending to the flock of Jethro. That's his father-in-law. He's walking through that desert. He looks over and there's this bush that is on fire. It is literally on fire. It is engulfed in flames and it's not being consumed by that fire. So the bush is still there. So what's Moses do? He runs off scared. No. He goes to investigate. It turns out that is God. That is God in the form of a burning bush. Pretty amazing. What about when God parted the Red Sea? That one's pretty amazing to me. It'd be like if I'm looking out here at you guys and we got this sea here and the aisle becomes the path that God opens up so that his people, so the Israelites can get away from danger, from their enemies. Think about that. We're talking about a sea. If that's hard for you to comprehend, think of like an ocean. I mean, think about the bathtub. Fill it with water, try to part it. What's it going to do? It's going to slip through your fingers, probably. It's not going to part perfectly. What about Daniel in the lion's den? When God protected Daniel from those lions. What about Jonah? When God called Jonah to go do something, what'd he do? He didn't go that way. He went the exact opposite way. And the big fish came and he swallowed him up. And Jonah lived through it. I can keep going with Old Testament stuff. What about New Testament? What about the virgin birth? What about Jesus literally being born from a virgin? We know that that doesn't happen. I mentioned earlier, what about when Jesus turned water into wine? We're talking literal water into wine. Or when Jesus healed a blind man. I would have loved to have seen that. Or when Jesus healed that guy that couldn't walk for 38 years and he gave him the ability to walk. I mean, these are some really cool, amazing things. What about that time Jesus fed 25,000 people from 5 loaves and 2 fish? How cool is that? How amazing is that? To watch as Jesus showed his compassion for this people, and I can almost guarantee you that you and I would probably be sitting there too, like the disciples, like, where's all this food coming from? We had 5 loaves and 2 fish. Completely amazing. I almost got to preach on this one, and it's probably my favorite miracle, favorite passage in the Bible. I believe it's next week, so I almost got to preach over this. But what about when Jesus walked on water? I mean, he walked on water. We're not talking about like ice or anything like that. It was water. Or what about when he brought Lazarus back from the dead? Or when he predicted the future about so many different things. One of them being Peter, saying, Peter, you're going to deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. Peter said, no, I'm not. Dude, I love you. I can't do that. And what did Peter do? He denied him 3 times, just like Jesus said. And what about the most amazing miracle, the most incredible miracle that Jesus performed? When he died on the cross, and 3 days later, he came back. He defeated death. Death cannot hold this guy down. You know why? Because he is God. The all-powerful God. The all-knowing God. Who is full of amazing miracles. He did them in the Bible, and guess what? He still does them today. Now, you're going to have to bear with me a little bit on this one. I'm probably going to get emotional. I'm going to talk about our baby. My lip did that little thing, where you're about to cry, and my lip did that already, just saying I'm going to talk about it. But the news of our baby, his name is Ezekiel, God's strength. His name is Ezekiel. We call him Baby Zeke. When we got the news that he didn't have kidneys, I struggled. A lot. I sat over here Christmas Eve in tears the whole service. Thinking about how bad I want to hold my baby next Christmas. The struggle. It's not been a lack of trust. It's not been a can God do this? Because I know God can. My struggle has been, do I deserve a miracle? That's been what I've struggled with. How bad of a person I am, how much I need Jesus, how much I need help. Why would Jesus give me this kind of miracle? And then I was talking to my aunt, and she reminded me of God's love. Anytime I sit down and I start thinking about God's love, this is what happens. I start tearing up because I know how much I need him. I know how much if he was not in my life, how much worse I would be. It's not if I deserve a miracle, because he's already given me the most amazing miracle he can give me. And maybe you're somebody who thinks that same thought. That, hey, I don't deserve anything good in my life. I don't deserve any love. God has already given it to you. That miracle, that love, that compassion. God loves you so much that he sent Jesus to earth to die for you. God has already given us the greatest miracle the world has seen for the greatest thing the world needs. It doesn't matter any other miracles that God might give us. Those are all extra blessings. He's already done more for us than we deserve. That's a fact. You and I, the Bible is very clear, we deserve death. That is a spiritual death. That is eternal death, separated from God because we are sinners. Because we are sinners, we need a Savior who has the perfect compassion for the worst of sinners. Without that one miracle, that perfect, amazing, incredible miracle of Jesus defeating death, without that miracle, you and I would be doomed forever. The kids always look at me because when I say forever, I say forever. And they don't know where it comes from. They haven't seen the Sandlot movie. I know. They just, on Wednesday nights, they don't know where the Utes comes from. But we got to sit back and we got to watch God work. He will do incredible and amazing things. He does incredible and amazing things. And when he does, we got to tell people about it. We got to tell people about him. I went to go see that new Batman movie on Tuesday, and everybody I talk to, I tell them about Batman. I've been a Batman fan my entire life. If I'm that excited about a movie, I should be even more excited about Jesus.